Chapter 9, Skeletal Muscle Tissue. So, muscles are specialized for contraction. You know this. There are 3 types. You know this as well: skeletal, cardiac, and smooth muscle. But there will be some terminology in this chapter that you've got to memorize or it will make the reading difficult. For example, you have to memorize that in this chapter a cell is called a fiber. And the reason this would become difficult later if you don't remember that is they'll be talking about myofilaments and fibrils. It all sounds the same. So you've got to remember that a muscle fiber is the cell. A skeletal muscle is actually an organ, and it's made mostly of skeletal muscle tissue, but there's also connective tissue, nerves, and blood vessels. And skeletal muscles are directly or indirectly attached to bones, hence the name skeletal muscle. There are a variety of functions of skeletal muscle tissue. They produce body movement, maintain posture and body position, support soft tissues, guard entrances and exits, maintain body temperature, and store nutrients. Know some detail about each function. In comparing the types, visually there are differences. Skeletal muscles are multinucleated and very long. They're voluntary, and they produce movement by pulling on bones. Cardiac muscles are involuntary, only in the heart, and they function to pump the blood. Smooth muscles are involuntary, and they are in the walls of hollow organs and small arteries. A skeletal muscle, as I said, is an organ. This organ has a lot of connective tissue, and so we've got to look at the different layers of connective tissue. Epimysium is the dense sheet of collagen fibers around the entire muscle. So think of the biceps brachii, perhaps, and that entire muscle is surrounded by epimysium. It separates the muscle from other tissues and is connected to the deep fascia. So look closely at this diagram and understand what's going on here and the telescoping that's going on here. You can see this strand here, this with at the blue arrow, is a muscle cell or fiber. This muscle cell or fiber is surrounded by connective tissue called endomysium. Several cells, perhaps 20 cells, are bundled together into what is called a fascicle at the orange arrow, and this fascicle is surrounded by connective tissue called perimysium. A bundle of fascicles at the green area is the actual muscle itself, and that is surrounded by epimysium. So from superficial to deep, the connective tissue layers are epimysium, perimysium, endomysium. As you know, a skeletal muscle fiber is the individual muscle cell. And the cell it contains myofibrils, which are bundles of protein filaments. The endomysium is the thin layer of areolar connective tissue around each muscle fiber or cell. It has collagen and elastic fibers, blood vessels, and nerves. Also, you will find myosatellite cells that are stem cells that help repair damaged muscle tissue. If you've ever exercised so that your muscles hurt, you have damaged them enough that they need repair by the myosatellite cells. If they are tired, that's caused by a buildup of lactic acid. At the ends of skeletal muscles, so here you can see at the end of this skeletal muscle is a tendon, which will attach this muscle to the bone. What that tendon actually is are all the connective tissue layers, the epimysium, the perimysium, the endomysium, that continues past the protein to merge to form a tendon or aponeurosis. Here the tendon is attaching the muscle to bone. And aponeurosis, for example, here at the top of our head, it's a broad sheet with broad attachment to bone. So know the structure of your skeletal muscle and this telescoping picture here, understanding the connective tissue layers. Myoblasts are embryonic cells that fuse to form multinucleate cells that differentiate into skeletal muscle fibers. Some myoblasts remain free in the endomysium as myosatellite cells, and those are essential for repair. So you can see here a typical skeletal muscle with it's multinucleated, it's very long. With all those nuclei, they have multiple copies of genes for protein and enzyme production. Muscle cells are extremely energy needy. There are other terms that relate to the muscle cells besides the term fiber, which refers to the muscle. The sarcolemma is the term for the plasma membrane, and the sarcoplasm is the term for the cytoplasm. A third term, the Sarcoplasmic Reticulum, not here in later slides, is the endoplasmic reticulum. What is the role of myosatellite cells? They repair damaged muscle tissue. Which of these surrounds a muscle fascicle? Perimysium. Remember, a fascicle is a bunch of cells. The makeup of the skeletal muscle is very different from other cells. It has this sarcoplasmic reticulum that surrounds the myofibrils that make up the sarcomeres. The myofibril, and here you can see the myofibril, is a cylindrical protein. It runs parallel to the muscle fiber, runs the length of the muscle fiber, and the arrangement of the proteins in that myofibril are what gives the protein that striped appearance, this appearance of striations. You will also find many, many mitochondria along the myofibrils. So the myofibril is made up of bundles of protein, and those proteins are called myofilaments. There is a thick filament and a thin filament, and throughout the textbook and these PowerPoints, the thin filaments are pink and the thick filaments are purple. The thin filaments are called actin. Actin is thin. The thick filaments are called myosin. Myosin is thick. Actin is thin. Myosin is thick. The sarcolemma here is referring to the plasma membrane. A sarcomere is the repeating functional unit of skeletal muscle fiber. And a sarcomere would go from this zigzag line here to the next zigzag line. That zigzag line is called the Z-line, Z for zigzag. From Z-line to Z-line is one sarcomere. Again, the pink is the thin actin, the purple is the thick myosin. The thin actin, let's see here. Okay, so here the purple is the myosin. So this line right down the center of the myosin is the M line. Think of that as the myosin line. There is a zone of overlap between the pink actin and the purple myosin, and that is the zone of overlap. Here you can see that in cross section. The A band is that whole myosin distance. The I band is just actin, the zone of overlap, and the H band is this region here where there is just myosin, no actin. The Z lines are the junction of adjacent sarcomeres. Here the proteins connect those thin actin filaments. The I band is just the actin filaments, the thin actin. The A band is a darker, dense region containing thick filaments. The zone of overlap within the A band is where the thick myosin overlaps with the thin actin. The M line is the center of the A band where the myosin connects. And the H band is the lighter region on each side of that M line with only thick filaments. The sarcolemma, again, is the plasma membrane of the skeletal muscle fiber, and it allows ions to cross so that there is an uneven distribution of ions inside and outside the cell. In order for a muscle contraction to occur, there has to be a switching of these charges, or a reversal of the charges. And this change in charge always is initiated by a neuron, and then that change will spread across the entire sarcolemma, which is the plasma membrane. The transverse tubules, you can see here, are tubules that are open to the sarcolemma. They're at right angles to the cell surface here, and they are continuous while they extend into the sarcoplasm, but these transverse tubules, or T-tubules, form passageways through the muscle fiber. This blue here is the Sarcoplasmic Reticulum, and its function is calcium storage. The Sarcoplasmic Reticulum is similar to smooth endoplasmic reticulum in other cells. However, it is a region of calcium storage. A calcium ion pump pumps calcium into the Sarcoplasmic Reticulum. Muscle contractions start when the stored calcium ions are released from the Sarcoplasmic Reticulum into the cytosol, and this release is through gated calcium channels. Which of the following stays the same length when filaments slide? The A band. Which of the following contains both thick and thin filaments? The A band.